Hello everyone, glad to be back. Today is 21st of June, now it's almost 10 o'clock in the morning Moscow time. I'm Levan Kudadze and this is my first update in which I will share all the main news that are making headlines in Russian media outlets and Russian language pages on different internet platforms. There are quite a few very significant developments and news that I like to share with you for this moment. But before I start, let me take a couple of minutes and make a little announcement. Towards the end of today's first update, I will share with you a little part of my yesterday's second update for Patreon. It will be a short video from that I made yesterday in the central part of the city of Vladicavcaz, where I am guesting for summertime. And for the future, I will try to make similar stuff. I will try to share with you little parts of updates that I do for Patreon. This way, hopefully, I will manage to generate a little bit more interest among members of our community towards my Patreon page, and maybe I will have a little bit more subscribers there, which is extremely important to me and for my channel, because Patreon is one of the major lifelines for this project and channel, together with PayPal and Buy Me a Coffee, of course. That's been said, let's talk about news now, and I will start with Moscow and Moscow region, because this morning we had reports that Russian air defense systems did manage to neutralize 3 drones in New Moscow. That's a new part of Moscow and Moscow region, and according to this is TASS news agency is reporting about it, and according to latest information, 2 drones were neutralized by radio electronic warfare systems in Moscow region, and 1 was in New Moscow. There is no reports about any significant damage on the ground and casualties among civilians, which is of course great news. But when it comes to fact itself, that Ukraine is continuing its attempt to hit deep inside Russian territory, all along towards Moscow, which is quite far away from Ukrainian border and zone of special military operation. Fact itself definitely are disturbing, and I guess in retaliatory measure, Moscow will try to neutralize all the areas that these drones were launched. That's main news for this hour in Russian media outlets. Maybe during the day we will see second wave of Ukrainian drones around Moscow, but for now it seems like our defense systems of Russian Federation around capital are working quite effectively, and they did manage to neutralize all aerial targets. Let me continue now, and we have also TASS news agency's report, according to which Russian armed forces did manage to eliminate a Ukrainian recon and sabotage group in Zaporozhye front line, which is on this land bridge between Crimea and mainland Russia. And when it comes to Zaporozhye region, as I said, and as I'm saying for almost a week now, or maybe even more, it's operational pause. I call it operational pause because it's calm. It's quite a calm situation on the Zaporozhye sector of the front line. After first wave or first stage of this Ukrainian so-called counteroffensive, when Russian side basically decimated all the Ukrainian brigades that were participating in these offensive moves, after that we are seeing decrease in activity, significant decrease in activity, and now for last couple of days we only hear reports about local scale fight between the sides in Orekhov direction, and here hot point is Pitikhatki still settlement, and activity is taking place in direction of this land bridge, Remensky Ledge, between Ugledar and Gulay Pole. Rest of the front line even more quieter than on these areas, where at least some local scale offensive operations have been conducted by Zelensky's regime. And by the way, very same time, Russian side is also conducting offensive operations in these areas to regain control over the settlements that was lost during the initial stage of Ukrainian counteroffensive. But overall assumption, if we are characterizing situation on the Zaporozhye front line, even Russian military experts are now using this terminology that it's operational pause. When it comes to Kherson region, and let me give you some quick summary about overall situation on the entire front line. Kherson region is artillery duels between the sides. Donetsk direction is active as usually it happens, and main hot points still are Marinka and Avdiivka here. Also, we can call it hot point in direction of Bakhmut or Artyomovsk. There are some significant local scale clashes that has local significance in flanks of Bakhmut, and as I said yesterday, it seemed, and day before, it seems like Ukrainian forces in this direction did run out of steam, and now it's Russian side that are conducting some local scale offensive operations. Quite significant activity in direction of Seversk, particularly in Belogorovka area. That's also usual stuff. It does happens every day. And by the way, we have some additional news that Russian side is conducting offensive operations in direction of Liman and in direction of Kupiansk. I did report about it yesterday, but during the day and late afternoon we did had additional information that Russian side definitely did manage to achieve some significant success, even though it's a local scale, but still it's a significant success. And it seems like predictions of mine and some other channels becoming true, and Russian side is using opportunity that they receive as a result of a extreme stretching of Ukrainian forces. Russian side now using this opportunity and conducting and trying to breach Ukrainian lines of defense in the northern part of the front line. And it seems like Zelensky's regime is unable to reinforce Ukrainian units in the northern part. And more than that, there are some reports that Zelensky's regime is removing some brigades from northern part and central part of the front line and sending and deploying those brigades in direction of Zaporozhye front line, which may be a good indicator that Washington and London not giving Zelensky and his associates much time to continue this so-called counteroffensive. And if that's the case, then in coming days we will probably see significant activization of Ukrainian forces in Zaporozhye direction, and in that case I am predicting that we will also see increase in significant increase instances where Ukrainian units, small and big units, will disobey orders and refuse to participate in offensive operations. Probably we will see also significant increase in in facts when Ukrainian units are making decision to surrender, and this type of instances are becoming quite almost daily stuff nowadays, because we on daily basis receiving information that more and more Ukrainian soldiers are lay down arms and surrendering. Yesterday afternoon, for example, there was a report that 40 Ukrainian soldiers did lay down arms. That's more than platoon, isn't it? Did lay down arms and surrender. I did not see confirmation of that information on official media outlets yet, but maybe today during the day we will see some additional photo or video confirmation of that information. But even without that, there is plenty of instances lately when Ukrainian soldiers are making right decision, lay down arms and surrendering, and saving their lives. So that's a quick summary of the situation on the front line. Let me continue now with some additional news. And next information is also about repeal of Ukrainian attempt of conduct counteroffensive, local scale counteroffensive, this time in the direction of Tarskoe. And according to this information, which is reported by RIA Novosti, Russian intelligence did find the location of Ukrainian units that were trying to conduct offensive in this direction. Aviation support was called in, and as a result of strikes by Russian Air Force against units of 63rd and 42nd mechanized brigades of Ukrainian armed forces, these units did retreat after taking heavy losses in manpower and military equipment. So Russian aviation, as you probably notice, not just from my main updates, but also on Telegram channel, where I do share plenty of videos with with activity of Russian aviation. Now it's becoming too clear that Russian aviation is playing huge part nowadays on the front line, and they are becoming more and more active. And basically, Russian helicopters and frontline bombers are nightmare. Had become nightmare for Ukrainian forces, especially mechanized brigades, because plenty of video footage with the destruction of Ukrainian military equipment. Let me continue now, and this is TASS News Agency's report, according to which Russian side did manage to conduct a successful counteroffensive in LPR. As a result, and this was possible because of constant attempts to attack by Ukrainian side. So probably Russian side was waiting when Ukrainian forces in LPR will run out of steam, and then conducted. This is Kupiansk direction, by the way, we are talking about. And then Russian side conducted its offensive, and now we are seeing more and more confirmations. And this time it's Andrei Marochko is talking about it, colonel of from LPR, Lugansk People's Republic, and he is confirming information that we had previously, that Russian side did manage to achieve significant success in Kupiansk direction. Kupiansk is here, by the way, and there are some reports. I did not see any photo or video confirmation, but there are some reports on Russian language channels or pages that forward units of Russian forces are right next to Kupiansk itself right now. So success that Russian side did had is more than a local right now. It's bigger than local scale, because if Kupiansk will become a hot point, then I guess we will witness offensive operations of Russian forces all along the borderline, and especially all along the Kharkov region. And if you remember, I did say quite a few times before that fact that Ahmad special forces were deployed in Belgorod region, and these forces are storm troopers. They know how to liberate urban areas. They know it very well, and the fact that these forces were deployed in Belgorod region, and there are some rumors that in coming weeks PMC Wagner units will be deployed in Belgorod region. This information does give us a good indicator to predict that in near future Russian side will become even more active in direction of Kupiansk, in direction of Kharkov region, and maybe we will see attempt from Russian side to regain control over all the territories that was lost during the so-called Ukrainian counteroffensive in 2022, when Russian side did make decision to regroup, withdraw forces from Kharkov region, after which Ukrainian side did start actively shelling neighboring with Ukraine regions of Russian Federation, that being Belgorod region, Kursk region, Bryansk region, and so on. So I think somewhere around the middle of the next month we will probably see battle for Kharkov region. Let's see. Let me continue now, and if not earlier than that. So this is also interesting news, by the way. Andrei Marochko, military expert from LPR, also reporting that during the previous week Ukrainian forces on LPR direction did lost 2,300 soldiers and mercenaries, which is quite a significant number, isn't it? As we all know, main attention from media and from public all these days, last 2-3 weeks, were directed towards Zaporozhye front line, because that's the area that Ukrainian side or Zelensky's regime was conducting this anticipated by many counteroffensive. But very same time there was significant activities on other areas also on the front line, and the Lugansk People's Republic is not exception. And as a result of those fights on that directions, Ukrainian forces lost 2,300 soldiers and mercenaries, KIA and wounded, which is almost a brigade, by the way. In Ukraine, there are some brigades that only have about 2,000 soldiers, really. So that's losses of Ukrainian side on Lugansk in direction of Lugansk People's Republic in a single week. So that's why Russian side is managing without any significant issues really to conduct quite successful local scale offensive operations in the northern part of the front line, because as I said, Ukrainian forces are too stretched, logistic for Ukrainian side becoming a total nightmare, especially because they are using now so many equipment from so many countries that I cannot even imagine how difficult it must be to supply all these units that are operating with different military systems, to supply all them with ammunition, fuel, and spare parts and the rest of it. It's definitely total nightmare, I guess, for Zelensky's regime. And once again, they have no manpower. Ukrainian side, Zelensky's regime is experiencing huge problems with manpower. And that's why probably we are seeing yet another wave videos from Ukraine when Zelensky's regime is trying to kidnap basically people from the streets under guns and forcefully send them to frontline. They just don't have enough manpower. And by the way, in that sense, when it comes to this forceful mobilization that taking place in Ukraine, lately we are seeing more and more reports about kidnapping of people from western regions of Ukraine, from Lvov region and surrounding areas. That did not happen that often previously, because mainly Zelensky's regime was trying to forcefully mobilize people from southeastern parts of Ukraine, Russian-speaker citizens of Ukraine. But only so many people they could mobilize in those areas. And that's why they are now, in desperation, they are now mobilizing or kidnapping and forcefully sending to on the front line people that are living in the western parts of Ukraine. So yes, that's quite significant information in my understanding. And if Zelensky's regime will be forced to continue its so-called counteroffensive in Zaporozhye direction, and if we will see more and more informations that Kyiv is redeploying brigades from central and northern parts of Ukraine in direction of Zaporozhye region, then I guess Ukrainian forces will be even more stretched in the northern part, and that will open up great opportunity for Russian armed forces to conduct not just local scale offensive operations but large scale offensive operations. And as I said, maybe towards middle of the next month we will see large-scale Russian counteroffensive in direction of Kharkov region, in direction of maybe Chizhov Yar, in Donetsk People's Republic also, in direction of Chizhov Yar, in direction of Konstantinovka, and eventually, of course, we will see before end of this summer, I guess we will see that Kramatorsk-Slaviansk defense line will become main hot point on the front line. But that's my prediction. As I said many times before, I'm a no way military expert, so my reading of this big picture may be mistaken. Who knows? Let me continue now, and this is RIA Novosti's report. Quite significant also information, because yesterday Defense Minister of Shoigu, Russian Federation, Sergei Shoigu, did made statement that Zelensky's regime is planning to conduct a massive attack on Crimean Peninsula and other regions of Russian Federation with Storm Shadow cruise missiles and HIMARS long-range missiles. And excuse me. And Shoigu did said that if this will happen, if this kind of strike will take place, this will be confirmation. This will be received by Moscow as a confirmation of direct involvement of US and UK in this conflict, and Russia will react accordingly on this kind of development. And also he said that this will be a red line after which Russian side will immediately take action against decision-making centers in Ukraine. I do understand that we did hear these kind of statements before about decision-making centers, and there were many warnings from Moscow, red lines and so on, but I guess this time Moscow is serious, very serious, and if in coming days we will see massive missile strike with British and US long-range weapons in direction of Crimea and in direction of Russian regions deep inside Russian territory, then I guess gloves are off and Moscow will start hunting down all so-called political and military leaders of Zelensky's regime. That's my reading of this picture. And by the way, if you remember, I did report on my Telegram page that during the previous days there were UK and US surveillance planes were very active right next to Crimea Peninsula, and maybe this activity has something to do with the statement that Shoigu made about Kiev's plans to strike, to conduct massive missile strike in direction of Crimea and mainland Russia. So let's see how situation will develop, but I think this time Moscow is not playing around, and if we will see strikes, massive missile strikes on Russian soil, then gloves are off, and the so-called leadership of current regime in Kiev will become a main target for Russian forces. But let's again, let's wait and see. Next information is also quite important. RIA Novosti is reporting that Russian military intelligence made statement and directly spoke to personnel of Ukraine's foreign ministry, and Russian foreign intelligence service did a call to members of Ukraine's embassy all around the world to make the decision and come to Moscow with their families, and the Russian side will provide all the security and all the help that they will need during this crisis that are taking place in Ukraine. Well, I don't think this statement is have been done for nothing. Probably there are some instances when staff of Ukraine's embassies are finding ways to contact Russian side and ask for help in immigration. And maybe when I read this information, I was thinking maybe Russian side now is beginning to build up some core of future future leaders of Ukraine, and maybe that's why Russian side is keen to bring to Russia former and current Ukrainian officials that are that did never participate in war crimes and so on, so that these people, after this conflict will end, will serve in Ukraine and will become a part of local management. Let's say this way. Otherwise, why should Moscow make such a statement? Why should they call to come to Russia Ukraine's officials, especially employees of Ukraine's foreign ministry? Because they are highly qualified professionals, supposed to be at least, and they do have in theory at least great potential to become next generation of officials in regions, in Ukrainian regions that already are part of Russia and will become part of Russia in foreseeable future after this conflict will end. I hope I did explain my reading of this situation well enough. So fact itself is quite interesting, and probably we will learn sometime in the future about facts that tens of employees, or maybe even hundreds of employees of Ukrainian embassies all around the world and their families did make this decision to and emigrate to Russia or come to Russia. Let me continue now, and oh, this is quite interesting. Some international news now. TASS news agency is reporting, based on article in Reuters, that EU leaders now are discussing among them and are coming up with the idea to ask China to play a bigger role in bringing to the end conflict in Ukraine. Well, we did hear these kind of statements from EU many times before, but very same time we are hearing from high-ranking officials of NATO, UK, US that it's unacceptable for Western world to have a peace in Ukraine on Russian terms. So if it's unacceptable for them to talk about peace on Russian terms, then there will be no peace, because Russia cannot withdraw its forces from nowhere, and Russia cannot allow this criminal, terrorist and Nazi regime to exist. Russia just cannot do this. So if there can be any peace talks, only on Russian terms. That's it. And if EU officials are thinking that China will somehow pressure Moscow to retreat from its own political positions when it comes to Ukraine, that's impossible. That's impossible. No China, no any other country in the world can pressure Russia so much so that Moscow will say no to its own security, to security of Russian Federation and citizens of Russia. This is not happening. But this information once again does highlights how out of touch with reality these so-called elites in the West are. You know. Let me continue now, and this is also TASS news agency's report, according to which, and according to which, on 18th of July next month, grain deal will probably end. So-called grain deal will probably end, because we have a statement from high-ranking official of Russian Foreign Ministry, Sergei Virshavin, according to whom, and he is a deputy of minister, by the way, according to whom all the points, all the topics in that grain deal that still are working, and as you know, by the way, points that was in favor of Russia, or points that topics that were including Russian interests, never worked. But points that were in favor of Ukraine did work perfectly well since beginning of this grain deal, and now this Russian official from Foreign Ministry is saying that those topics, those points that were in favor of Ukraine and working pretty well, will end on 18th of July. So basically, I read this statement as a announce of a fact that Russian side will no longer prolong this deal. So let's see. This deal was quite important for Ukraine itself, of course, for Zelensky's regime, because they were making billions. This was important for Turkey also, and for the Western elites, but it did nothing for Russian side, this grain deal. And eventually Moscow came to terms that it's just too damaging to Russia to continue this deal, and I guess this issue will be finally resolved on 18th of July. Let me continue now, and this is RIA Novosti's report, according to which leadership of France did change its mind, and now they are supporting Ukraine to join NATO. That's quite... This information is based on article in Le Monde, French newspaper, and when I read it, I was thinking, do this newspaper, Le Monde, lives in, or journalists of that newspaper are living in some parallel universe, or what the hell is happening to them? Because since then France was against. Since when France was against Ukraine to join NATO? All France officials were openly saying that they are supporting Ukraine, and they are supporting Ukraine to join NATO, and they are on very same position right now. So no changes in this sense, and Le Monde is wrong big time. They are just fucking idiots. Oh, sorry by the way. Sorry for my French. But they truly are, poorly qualified to do a journalistic job, because I would not say anything like that. France and all the other so-called independent states of Europe are in active support of Ukraine, and they want Ukraine to... they wanted Ukraine to join NATO, but they knew perfectly well that it cannot be done. It's just technically impossible to take Ukraine into the NATO now, and it will never be possible in the future. But I did wanted to share with you this article to highlight what level of journalism is taking place in France. And Le Monde, as I understand, is one of the major newspapers in France. And those idiots, it seems like those idiots were thinking that France was against Ukraine to join NATO, man. Really? Unbelievable. That's why probably France is sending so much weapons to Zelensky's regime, so much money to Zelensky's regime, and that's why France was very actively training Ukrainian forces, even before beginning of this special military operation, that they were against Ukraine to join NATO. Where is the logic, for God's sake? But nowadays, it's too obvious for everyone in good mind that Ukraine will never join NATO. It's technically impossible, and I don't really understand why this topic is still active in Western media. Just why? But maybe, I would not be surprised if these so-called officials in European states don't really know chapters of NATO itself, this organization. Maybe they don't know rules that NATO applies whenever they are receiving new member. And major rules are that country to become a member of NATO should not have territorial issues and should not be in conflict, military conflict. Do Ukraine applies to any of these criteria? Of course not. So what all these newspapers and so-called journalists and politicians in the EU are talking about, man? Let me continue, and this is Artie's report about statements, yet again, that Jens Stoltenberg, head of NATO, did made, according to which Russia is successfully contained Ukrainian offensive, and Stoltenberg did spoke about Ukrainian attempts to breach Russian defense lines, and he did said that Russian troops had been able to establish well-prepared defense lines, which is difficult for Ukrainian forces to penetrate. And I guess after these kind of statements, we will see from Western so-called elites more and more statements about failure of Ukrainian counteroffensive, and maybe because they have some issues now in their hands. Maybe they will come up with some other ideas how to escalate, because it's obvious that Zelensky's regime will never ever achieve any significant success on the front line. But at the very same time, Western elites do need to escalate further. They need to push Ukraine even more to make sure that this state will run out of manpower, to make sure that society in that state is broken, so that when Western neighbors of Ukraine take control over the western regions of that country, under whatever source, under whatever propaganda, they will receive minimal resistance. That's what they want now. And that's why they are still pushing Zelensky's regime directly or indirectly to continue this counteroffensive in direction of this land bridge between Crimea and mainland Russia. Because if Zelensky's regime, if Ukrainian generals will refuse to continue this suicidal offensive, then Western elites truly do have some issues in their hands, because Ukraine will maintain at least 50 to 60,000 more or less battle-ready units that can be deployed in any direction, not just on the Eastern Front, but also on the Western Front, if there will be one. So yes, in one hand, Stoltenberg here is acknowledging failure on part of Zelensky's regime, but in other hand, he's trying to very same time push Zelensky to continue this counteroffensive, because he's saying that it was expectable, really. It was expectable and nothing special is happening, so Ukraine should continue. But probably, I guess, because lately we are hearing many statements on this topic, maybe intelligence services of Western states, especially US and UK, do have some information that Ukrainian generals and colonels on the fields are against continuation of this suicidal counteroffensive. And this is definitely not in the plans of Western elites. And they have to come up with something to make sure that Ukraine will continue, and to make sure that Russia will neutralize vast majority of Ukrainian military personnel. So that Poland, Hungary, Romania, maybe Slovakia, and other countries that will participate in occupation of western parts of Ukraine will receive minimal resistance. It's just too obvious, isn't it? I do understand that it's only me, as for this moment, if I'm not mistaken, that are talking about inevitability of full disintegration of Ukraine, and inevitability of involvement in this conflict by NATO member states. Other channels are more careful. I do understand that, because it's risky to make such a prediction. But for God's sake, that's how I read this big picture. I'm quite sure that behind the scenes already some negotiations are taking place between major capitals in the West and Moscow on topic how to divide Ukraine. I'm absolutely sure about it, and as I sure that at least entire southeastern part of Ukraine, from Kharkov to Odessa region, will be under full Russian control, and entire western regions of Ukraine will be under full control of NATO member states. Only question still remains is Kiev, central part of Ukraine, Kiev and surrounding regions. because I think in the West there are some groups that want to maintain some statehood for Ukraine and to create some landlocked state under that name, with capital of Kiev and surrounding, and with surrounding regions. But I don't think Moscow will allow this to happen. And if Moscow have enough force, and if Moscow will be in position to dictate its terms, then I guess Kiev and surrounding areas also will be under full Russian control. So, and all we see now, all these movements, all this pressure from the West on Zelensky's regime to conduct this counteroffensive is all about this disintegration of Ukraine. Because, of course, NATO generals know perfectly well and knew perfectly well that this so-called counteroffensive will be suicidal. I didn't know it, for God's sake, and I'm no military expert. So, of course, NATO generals knew it perfectly well, and they still push Zelensky's regime to start this operation. Why? I mean, you tell me why. Where is the logic then? Only logical understanding or reading of this situation is that West wants push Ukraine towards breaking down. Western elites want Russian side to neutralize Ukrainian armed forces, so that NATO member states will receive minimal resistance when they will enter western regions of that failed state, and when they will try to establish no-fly zone and the rest of the stuff. So that's what is happening, really. That's what is happening, and I guess some generals and some colonels in Ukrainian army do beginning to realize this, and maybe they are refusing to conduct offensive operations. Maybe they are making sure that their voice have been heard in general stuff, and probably that's why we are seeing statements from the Western elites like similar to statements from Stoltenberg, that those casualties was expected, and of course Russian side did dig in that area and had the defense lines, and but it's a war, and stuff happens, and Ukraine should continue. Crazy, man. But it's interesting. It's interesting. Let's see if my prediction will be correct, and then remember these times when this channel was only one who was talking about inevitability of full-scale disintegration of Ukraine. Let me continue now, and by the way, how long is this video? 48 minutes. Wow. So I will go through headlines, if I may. So Interfax is reporting that United States or US elites did come up with some other scam or sham, and they are saying now that because of some mistakes in Pentagon, they did find out that they have additional $6 billion to spend for Ukraine, which means that they have additional $6 billion to steal. Basically, they will send some crap military equipment to Zelensky's regime and price those crops in unbelievable amount of money, and eventually these $6 billion will end up on accounts of US politicians, corrupt politicians, and US military industrial complex. And by the way, next information is exactly about this. Pentagon, according to Interfax news agency, once again, Pentagon did inform public that they did give an order for AMRAAM air-to-air medium-range missiles. They did give contract to Where is the name of that company, for God's sake? Famous Raytheon, yes, that's the name. So Pentagon did give a contract for $1.15 billion to Raytheon to and purchase this AMRAAM medium range missiles, air-to-air missiles. Well, when US did use air-to-air missiles last time? Do you remember that last time I see any air-to-air missile was used by US was when they did shut down this Chinese balloon with F-22 somewhere over the US territory. And I cannot remember other instances, to be honest, when US Air Force did use AMRAAM missiles. So they have plenty of those missiles probably in stock, but they are still, because they're all working, they're so-called politicians, and Pentagon itself working for military industrial complex, they are giving them additional $1.15 billion for those missiles that they don't need really, because they had plenty of it anyway. They never used those missiles. So that's a corruption for you. That's a pure example of corruption. That is basically legalized in US. Let me continue, by the way, and of course you all are informed about the situation with the submersible vehicle that went missing in area where Titanic did sunk that ship. And latest news is that Canadian plane did receive some acoustic signals in approximate area where this submersible, commercial submersible with some tourists supposed to be, and they only have those people that are trapped on that ship only have 48 hours, if I'm not mistaken, left, because in that time after that time air will run out, breathing air will run out from submersible, and yeah, so you know, US, Canada, many other countries are involved in this operation to find and rescue people in that submersible, and hopefully they will manage to do so. Hopefully they will manage it, but it's difficult, of course, because it's in thousands of feet under the water. So, well, that's the latest news, that there are some hope that people will be rescued, because Canadian plane did receive some acoustic signals. So let me continue now, and RT is reporting that China and Cuba close to military. RT is reporting based on Wall Street Journal's article that China and Cuba are close to military base deal. We are seeing history repeating itself, isn't it? In times of Cold War, it was Soviet Union that had military bases on Cuba, and now major superpower that are opposing West is China, of course, and it's quite possible that because of this extremely aggressive politics of Western world towards, especially US towards Cuba, maybe Havana will be forced to, not just maybe that, but Havana definitely are forced to looking for ways to deal with these illegal sanctions and pressure from the West, and it's quite possible that they will allow China to have a military basis on Cuba. That's not just security guarantees, some level of security guarantees for Republic, but also some income, because it will be not just military bases, it will be economical, increase in economical and trade activity between the sides also. So maybe even though both sides, Cuba and China, are denying that they are planning or having talks about military base in Cuba, but that's possibility in my understanding. Why not? Why not, for God's sake? It will be bad news for US, I do understand, but from point of view of Cuba, they will receive additional security guarantees. They will receive some economical assistance. So why should they refuse if China wants to establish military base in Cuba? And they will, by the way, pay for that base also. So it's a win-win situation for China and Cuba, isn't it? And next news is also reported by RT. And this is quite interesting news, because Russian companies did report revenues 8 times nation's GDP, which is quite something. So revenues of Russian businesses almost doubled in 2022 and topped the quadrillion rubles. That's 1 followed by 15 zeros. And this happened first time ever. And this was reported. This information was reported by RBK news agency. So Russian companies declared revenues of 1.268 trillion rubles. That's $15 trillion, by the way. Revenues in 2022, which is basically twice more than it was in 2021. So just the numbers will probably give you some quite good understanding about state of Russian economy. Because if Russian business did receive revenues for $15 trillion, that's quite something, isn't it? So the dramatic increase is attributed mainly to growth of export earnings, mainly in the oil and gas. But same time, surge was also down to recovery in consumer demand and goods and services. So it's not just oil and gas, but other sectors of economy also. So that's quite interesting news. I will definitely share this information on my Telegram page after I will upload this video, and a few more. This is last news, by the way. This is gonna be last news. RIA Novosti is reporting that Russia did become fourth largest trade partner for India, which is great news. And according to information of Russian Ministry of Trade and Industry, since the beginning of this year, since January to April, daily increase its imports from Russia 4.2 times, more than 4 times, up to $20.5 billion, and that's only in the first 5 months, which is quite something, isn't it? Which is quite something. So, as I said many times before, China, India are major partners for Russia, but very same time, Russia is increasing its trade relationships and improving its trade relationships with Turkey, with Iran greatly, With Cuba, by the way, I just spoke about Cuba. With the African nations, with states in Latin America. So, and that's why probably Russian economy is managing to withstand this immense pressure from the Western elites. And by the way, that's gonna be last news for today's update. But if I may, I will now share with you video footage that we made yesterday in the central part of the city. This is Vladicavcaz, by the way, central parts of Vladicavcaz, where we are guesting for summertime. Nice place. I do highly recommend that if you will visit Russian Federation, I will recommend to all of you to visit in North Ossetia, Alania. Also, it's a beautiful republic in Northern Caucasus region, in central part of Northern Caucasus region, and very friendly, very diverse, with many nice places. Vladicavcaz is a nice town, small town. It's only about 300,000 residents are living in the city, maybe a little more, but it's quite nice city and incredibly beautiful nature. So you will love it here if you will visit North Ossetia, Alania. And this is quite a long alley in central part of the city. As you can see, it's a very green city. It's trees everywhere and plenty of squares and parks. This is, by the way, sculpture of Kostas Hitagurov, famous and extremely respected poet, writer, thinker. And there is park right there. A big, very nice park. Also has a name of Kostas Hitagurov. It was, if I remember, I was saying that it was raining constantly, and yesterday for a few hours rain did stop, and we did went to a city. Because of weather, probably it was cloudy day, of course, and there are not that many people outside, but when it's sunny days, these areas are full with people. With locals, with tourists, because North Ossetia is a quite popular destination for internal tourists in Russia, and the popularity of North Ossetia is increasing year by year. And hopefully in 10-15 years time, Republic will receive enough funds with development of tourism industry, that some other sectors, local government will have opportunity to, support some other sectors also. And I believe Republic has huge potential. Republic has huge potential not just because of natural beauty and hospitality and history, unique history and culture, but also because of geographic location. Because all regions are unique and have unique culture and history and very nice places. But when it comes to geographical location, that's quite different stuff. And North Ossetia, Alania do have very good geolocation. It's basically a route from southern Caucasus to northern Caucasus, and great place to establish some business hub, economical hub for companies that are trading not just in region but also not just in Caucasus region but also in the region of Middle East, Central Asia, Europe. So quite nice, very nice place, very nice place. So yes, this is it. That was a little fragment from my yesterday's update on Patreon. So yes, this is it for this update, and I hope you will find this video interesting. It's too long, I do understand that, but you know, I hope you will find the update interesting, and if so, please hit that like button and leave some commentary about any topic you like. It's extremely important, because more likes and comments, videos, updates will have, more chances are that I will manage to reach wider audience. And if you can, please share links to my videos on my channel with your friends on Facebook, Twitter, Telegram, or any other platform that you're active on. And if you think this channel is interesting, informative, has some potential and deserves to exist in these fields of news and political commentary, please consider to support with small donations through PayPal, Buy Me Coffee, or by subscribing to my Patreon page. You will see links under this video in the description box. Excuse me. This is it for now. Have a great day and take care.